September 14, 1944, 8:17 a.m. Willow Run, Michigan. The bus stops with a hiss of air brakes. The doors fold open. Cold Midwestern air rushes in, sharp with the smell of oil and damp concrete. The German prisoners blink, their eyes adjusting, boots scraping as they step down onto unfamiliar ground. You can almost feel the hesitation in their movements. They are Luftwaffe and Wehrmacht officers, majors, captains, engineers, captured months earlier in Normandy and southern France. Men who have seen factories bombed into skeletons. Men who know what an industrial target is supposed to look like after years of war. This is not that. In front of them stretches a low, steel-gray horizon that seems to have no edge. No smokestacks rising like cathedral spires. No dramatic towers. Just a single, endless structure squatting on the flat Michigan plain, humming like a living thing. One of the prisoners squints, thinking this must be several buildings. It is. An American officer gestures casually. "Gentlemen," he says, "welcome to Willow Run." The guards don't rush them. There's no barked command, no theatrics. The Americans don't need to hurry. The building is doing the talking for them. As the group walks closer, the sound hits first. A low, continuous thunder, metal stamping, engines whining, rivet guns snapping in fast, precise bursts. The ground vibrates under their boots. The walls themselves seem to breathe. Inside, the doors slide open, and the war changes shape. The prisoners step into a space so vast it swallows perspective. Overhead lights stretch into the distance in perfect rows, disappearing into haze. Conveyor lines snake across the floor like steel rivers. Cranes glide silently above, carrying wings, fuselages, engine mounts, each piece moving with purpose, never stopping. A B-24 Liberator bomber rolls past them, not on a poster, not half-built, fully formed. One of the Germans, an older man with graying temples, a former aircraft production officer, instinctively checks his watch. He doesn't say anything, he just stares. An American guide speaks over the noise, his voice practiced, almost bored. At peak output, one bomber every 55 minutes. The words don't land immediately. The prisoners exchange glances. Someone laughs once, sharply, then stops. A captain shakes his head, convinced he's misheard. In Germany, a single bomber takes weeks, sometimes months. Components are scattered across forests, hidden in tunnels assembled by prisoners under constant air attack. Every delay compounds the next. Every bomb crater ripples through the system. Here there are no craters. The line keeps moving. They walk alongside it now, escorted but unhurried. The Germans notice details they can't ignore. Workers, men and women, move with calm precision. No panic, no shouting. Each person performs one task, then the next aircraft slides into place. A woman no older than 20 tightens fasteners along a wing route. 2 stations later, another worker installs wiring harnesses. Further down, engines are mounted as if they weigh nothing at all. One prisoner whispers in German, barely audible over the machinery, "This is not a factory." He searches for the word. "This is a system." They pass a board mounted high on a column, white letters on black background. Today's production goal, 19 aircraft. One of the guards notices their attention and smiles. "Yesterday we did 20. The German officer who had checked his watch finally speaks. His voice is quiet, controlled, almost reverent. 20 bombers, he says, in one day. Parallel assembly tracks branch off, feeding subassemblies forward with mathematical certainty. Wings built in one section, fuselages in another. Engines arriving pre-tested, pre-balanced, ready to bolt on. Nothing waits, nothing improvises. Everything arrives exactly when it is needed. For the first time since their capture, the Germans aren't thinking about food or guards or the wire fences back at camp. They're doing calculations. Runway lengths, fuel consumption, crew rotations, sortie rates. If this plant keeps producing like this for a year, one of them stops walking, the guard turns. Problem. The prisoner looks up at the ceiling, at the lights vanishing into distance, at the cranes gliding endlessly overhead. "No," he says, "I'm only realizing something." The guard raises an eyebrow. "What's that?" The German officer swallows. "That we were never fighting your army," he says, "we were fighting this." And somewhere deep inside the building, Another bomber rolls forward, its engines waiting to be awakened, while the prisoners begin to understand just how late this realization has come. They move deeper into Willow Run, and every step stretches the limits of their comprehension. It's not just the assembly line, it's the size of the workforce, the rhythm, the orchestration. Rows of workers, thousands of them, move like clockwork. Men in overalls, women in trousers, some wearing scarves tied like soldiers, kerchiefs, others with grease-stained hands, each performing a single task with surgical precision. A German major, once responsible for coordinating a dozen engineers in a small aircraft plant near Dresden, whispers to his companion, "They have more hands here than our entire operation in Europe." He isn't exaggerating. The prisoners follow the line, craning their necks as fuselages glide past on overhead cranes. Every few seconds, a completed bomber is lowered gently onto the floor, wheels touching with a soft thud. Engines roar to life in testing bays, propellers spinning as if mocking the slow, painstaking methods back home. They pass a logistics section where parts are stacked like Jenga towers, yet never topple. Pallets of engines, wings, and fuselage sections move silently along conveyor belts, guided by forklifts operated with military precision. One German engineer leans closer, squinting at the labels in English. Crate 14A, Allison V1710 engine, torque checked, ready for installation. Every crate, every rivet, every bolt has already been thought of, pre-planned, and delivered exactly when needed. There is no wasted motion. There are no mistakes, and yet somehow it feels effortless. They enter a section where a dozen bombers are lined up side by side, ready for final assembly. The prisoners step carefully, almost afraid to touch the gleaming aluminum. One younger officer, barely 22, his uniform still smelling faintly of European gunpowder, runs a hand along a fuselage. The metal is cold, smooth, unblemished. He exhales. This is impossible," he mutters. It isn't just the speed, it's the cumulative scale. In Europe, factories can produce perhaps one bomber per week if all goes well. Here, one arrives every hour. He does the math in his head. 10 hours, 10 bombers, 20, 30. Within a single week, this factory alone can outproduce entire Luftwaffe wings that took months to assemble. The realization strikes like a physical blow. One prisoner steps back, nearly tripping over the metal footings. His eyes dart around, trying to find a flaw. There is none. Everything hums along like a machine designed by a god with infinite patience. Another officer, an older colonel, hair thinning, eyes sharp, turns to his peers. His voice is quiet but urgent. "Do you see it?" They nod, but no one speaks. The weight of the truth presses down on them. This is why the Allies could keep flying raids despite losses. This is why every raid seems to arrive faster than anticipated. This is why victory is not a question of battlefield tactics alone. They reach a section where bombers are being tested on small mobile runways inside the hangar. Engines roar, propellers bite into the air. The noise is deafening but precise. Not a single step is wasted. One German engineer rubs his temples. "We built bombers," he admits quietly. "And we thought we knew what production meant. But this is a different war entirely." The prisoners pause by a control board showing daily production targets. Numbers climb in real time. Aircraft completed. 18 right arrow, 19 right arrow, 20. The board flickers, relentless. A guard notices them staring and smiles. "Tomorrow, we aim for 21, he says casually, as if discussing the weather. The prisoners exchange glances. One swallows hard. Another laughs, once bitter, incredulous. How can a single factory do this?" someone whispers. No one has an answer. They only have the unfolding truth. The war they thought they were fighting is already over in the factories. Not in the skies, not on the front lines, but here, inside a massive steel cathedral of production, where humans, machines, and planning converge into unstoppable momentum. And as they follow the line toward the finishing bays, another bomber rolls forward, gleaming, complete, unstoppable. And with it, A haunting realization settles in the hearts of every German prisoner. The battlefield has already shifted, and they were the last to know. The prisoners reach the final assembly area, where completed B-24 liberators sit like trophies waiting to be flown. Engines idle, crews check instruments, and the smell of hot oil and metal fills the cavernous space. The sheer scale is suffocating. It presses down on their shoulders as if the building itself is judging them. One German officer, a former Luftwaffe production manager named Hauptmann Dietrich, stands frozen. He had seen factories destroyed by Allied bombing and thought he understood the limits of human industry. Now he realizes he never had a limit to compare. He steps closer to a bomber, tracing the fuselage with a trembling finger. This is impossible," he whispers, more to himself than anyone else. He remembers the painstaking months it took to assemble a single Heinkel bomber back in Germany, hidden workshops, scarce resources, constant threat of air raids. Here, wings float effortlessly into place, dozens of workers coordinating seamlessly, no interruption, no delay. He turns to the officer beside him. We were fighting ghosts," Bauer says, his voice cracks. "We weren't fighting men, we were fighting this machine." The realization spreads through the group like a chill wind. Each of them starts calculating silently: sorties, fuel, pilot training, losses. Every number confirms the same terrifying truth. Germany's war effort, no matter how brilliant, no matter how desperate, cannot match this scale. Not in months, not in years, not ever. They are quiet now. Some stare at the moving assembly lines. Some glance at the massive display boards counting daily production. Each number is a reminder. The battlefield is not only in Europe or the Pacific. It exists here in factories, in schedules, in steel, and in relentless human coordination. A guard notices their silence. He points toward a bomber being towed to a test bay. "Next week it flies," he says. Hauptmann Dietrich swallows hard. He feels a knot form in his stomach, a mix of awe and despair. The war isn't just about strategy or courage, it's about who can produce faster. And here, the Americans have already won. One by one, the prisoners turn back toward the exit. Their minds are heavy with numbers, possibilities, and the undeniable proof of what they face. They leave Willow Run not as soldiers thinking they can continue fighting, but as witnesses to something larger than any battlefield. A war won not by guns alone, but by sheer, relentless industrial might. As the doors close behind them, another bomber rolls forward inside the plant, engines waiting, propellers ready, and the deafening hum of production continues without pause. And somewhere deep in the hearts of those German officers, a single thought lingers. They were never fighting an army. They were fighting a factory.